you up. We'll try to work with her.
Okay, just for the sake of the recording, we've presented a comparative document of the 2020 budget and the new 2021 proposed budget. And we'll review it by change parts or any other focus we like to bring. And so for your convenience, I've outlined any of the changes and tried to put a percentage on them. Most, so you could get a sense of that. And then I've asked Paul to present the budget or lead us through comments on changes or any other comments you'd like to make, Paul, would be very welcome. And do you want to take questions item by item, Paul, or would you like to make a presentation and then take questions?
Well, I was going to review it pretty much by item, particularly the changes from last year.
Okay, I'm just saying, would you like us to interrupt with questions as you're doing it, or would you like us to wait until you've done the review and then ask you questions?
No, go ahead and interrupt. That's fine.
Okay, and if anybody has questions, feel free to raise them. Thanks, Paul.
Okay. On the revenue side, of course, the tax levy has been increased technically by 1.99%, which yields $23,450. So that's a change in that. The New York State Library support, which is the second item here, is very static. As you know, we're facing a 20% reduction this year, but we have no idea if that's going to carry over into next year. So I pretty much left that the same. You'll see a reduction in the E-rate reimbursement. That's because that program has been phasing out over the last couple of years. And it's my belief that it's pretty much done. I don't think we're going to see any more income from that program.
The photocopies program is done, you say? What program are you referring to?
The E-rate reimbursement.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Fines and fees, as you know, we have dropped fines, late fees. So there's a pretty big reduction here. What is left is essentially money that we receive as replacements for lost material or lost and damaged. But also there are still fines left on the hotspots and on museum passes. 8,000 might be reasonably generous there, but we're not sure yet how that's going to play out exactly. And then you'll see the special services. I simply add that. We have, obviously, this year we didn't collect 85,000 because we suspended the CDTA passes, bus passes. Next year, we're not sure, but this item is, again, a wash. It doesn't really add anything more than, 2% to our actual budget. So it's not terribly critical.
Did you make a guess as to when the CDTA program would be more active?
Well, we have started again with the program, but we have restricted it to credit cards rather than cash because of the added problem of handling that much cash. So we have restarted the program, at least for credit cards. I'm not sure, just this month, so we haven't really got any income figures yet for that. Any other questions on income?
I had a quick question. So just to clarify, the 15,500 that are from 2020 that already reflects the I think you said it was a 20% cut that we
No, the
experienced?
15.5 is without the 20% cut. And
Okay,
that's the current budget. So we
Okay.
did reduce it in the current budget. I carried it forward again, it's a static figure except for that 20% cut into 2021, but we really don't know if that 20% cut is going to apply for next year.
okay.
So-
So we're just kind of hoping that it doesn't apply and that that number stays the same. Gotcha. Okay.
Well, I just wondered in the area of revenue and operations, are you worried about any particular item on there in terms of our ability to accomplish it? Anything keep you awake at night?
I think, let's see, I worry about everything. I think, a little bit about the state aid, but it's not a huge amount. It's not it's not a crippling amount or anything. I'm not sure where we stand on the fundraising at this point. So that's something that, we need to talk about going forward. But
Okay.
again, grant support, that figure we use, that's not the construction grants. That figure we use for program type grants. And, if we don't receive that money, we don't do the program. We don't have the expense, the corresponding expense. So that sort of sums it up.
And your choice not to accept CDTA purchases if the people don't have a credit card, does that impact a segment of the population? Where will they then have to go to purchase?
Yeah, we normally get a lot of cash, Bob. I mean, it's, yes, it is an impact. There's several other outlets in the area. Price Chopper does it. I'm trying to think. I think Hannaford as well. And actually up the street, the music hall does it, but I'm not sure how busy they are. We're a lot more busy than they are. So I don't know exactly whether they are operational at the moment.
Did you say the music hall does it,
Yeah,
Paul? Well, I don't know that they're even open. Because they're not doing any
I think the office is open,
Uh-huh.
and that's where they do it.
How would people know that though? I mean, it's not, how would the general public who needs these passes?
All these sites are supposed to be on the CDTA website.
Yeah, if they don't have a website. I mean, we're talking about people who live, who are more disadvantaged, maybe don't have access to all of that stuff, a website, all that, credit card, etc. How do they find out about the music hall, for instance? I don't know.
Well, I would imagine that ostensibly if they only have cash, they don't have credit cards, and they need to purchase a CDTA card with cash, then at that point, the library could refer them to the music hall.
Yep.
Or other.
Right.
Does the music hall take cash?
That
Have
I
they changed
don't know.
the policy? Maybe we need to coordinate. Well, we've made this decision, but how do we get $9,000 or however much we're getting, $5,000 out of them if they use a credit card? They just CDTA just gives us $5,000. How do we collect the $5,000 difference?
Yeah, it's just
Our commission.
a figure because it had been up till March, it had been a growing source of income there.
Right. We had cash, but now that It's credit card, how do we get the money? How do we get that money? How do we get our commission from CDTA? Do they
Well,
send this back?
CDTA bills us for the use. And the difference between what we collect and what they bill us for is how we get the money.
Oh, okay. All right. So they bill us because we're getting the cash. But, okay. All right.
Paul,
Well,
I
now
ha-
the credit card, does that change anything?
The system is hooked up to CDTA. They know what goes on.
Okay.
I just have one other question, Paul. About how many people, before we made the change, would buy CDTA cards per day, let's say? Would it be creating traffic? And just wonder how active a program it was in terms of the numbers served.
Oh, when it, before March, it was very active. We were up at least to 90,000 and maybe more in terms of purchases. So that's a lot of traffic coming into the library. That's a lot of people.
Right.
I don't have the exact numbers, but
I think we were doing about $10,000 a month.
could be.
Both. So I don't know what that translates to in terms of the number of people, but there was substantial.
Sometimes it was, the bag that went to the bank was very heavy. I had to bring my car most of the time.
And what percentage do we get of that? What's our cut?
About 2%.
And
2%. Okay, thanks.
Have you had any difficulty with any customers who were complaining about the change?
no, I haven't heard anybody. I think people kind of understand the situation.
Okay, all right. If you'd like to move on,
Wait, Bob, sorry, I just had one more question about income. And if this feels kind of off topic, I'm happy to move this conversation offline so it doesn't eat up a bunch of meeting time. But Paul, you said fundraising was one of the things that was going to keep you maybe up at night. Is the 25 grand number from 2020, is that a number that we had hoped to hit? Like, are we on track to hit that number? Or is that like a normal times number that we're hoping will apply to 2021?
There's always a little hope in there. But it's a number that is doable given the kind of fundraising we have been doing.
Okay.
And that fundraising is essentially, an annual appeal letter.
Right. Okay.
And that annual appeal letter, again, when you're talking about our fundraising, you have to appeal to residents of the city of Troy.
Mm-hmm.
You don't go beyond that. It's not like us. Some fundraisings, it's regional, it's state, it's national. We're just the city of Troy, and every town around has a library that they support.
Okay.
And
So that 25 grand is something that we hit or are close to hitting for this year, even with the pandemic?
we have been reasonably close. It's a little bit
Okay.
it's a little bit difficult to chart because it goes over the year into the next year, that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
But I think it's pretty close to our experience.
I don't think we have any way of knowing how much we can expect during this uncertain time,
Right.
whether
Right.
people will be able to afford to give like they have in the past or not. So
Well, that'll be
Yeah.
a big question, yes. Also, in the past, we have done special fundraising events, which may be something to talk about.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
is there an average contribution, sort of an average contribution that people give, or what do people usually give?
It varies a great deal, depending on their circumstance. So some people give $25 or $50. Other people give in the thousands of dollars.
Mhm. And does that include the McCarthy Foundation and the other foundations, or
No.
are that under grants?
That's not grants nor other kinds of support. No, that's entirely fundraising.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
If we can, we could move into the expenses. And the first up is materials budget. And what I have done, and I think most of the categories that you see were reduced except for ebooks. I did have to look at the book budget to, supplement some of the needs that we had, particularly on the salary line. So it is reduced by a total of $9,875. But I did increase the ebooks budget. That is one part of the materials budget that is growing and growing rapidly. The rest of the book budget and book circulation is pretty well steady. It's not increasing particularly. So I felt it important to acknowledge the ebook, the interest in ebooks that we have out there. So that's where that comes from.
When we slowed down materials purchase earlier in the year and then we began to resume it, do you have any idea of the impact? Will you be doing catch up a little as well?
Yes, to a certain extent, it always has an impact because suddenly, we're missing some of the newer books, newer materials. Yeah, we've started up the ordering again. As I say, it may not actually reflect the total that we have in the book budget for this year, just because our suppliers are slowed down as well. So we're not getting material as fast as we usually do.
Under other items, what are continuations?
Continuations we have sort of a series of standard continuations like the travel books, Fodor's, for example. These are books that are on kind of like a standing order.
Okay.
So anything that is like that and on a standing order, that's continuation.
Atlases and the maps or the things that would change, update?
Yeah.
I'd looked also at what we've expended this year. And under periodicals and databases, we had already exceeded what you're putting in to the budget.
That is possible. Basically, part of that is kind of dependent on how much the Central Library and the Upper Hudson pick up in terms of databases. If one gets dropped, we tend to want to pick it up to continue. With this budget, that may not always be the case.
And then I wondered about where the hoopla falls. Is it under audiovisual?
That I envision in the ebooks.
Okay, because when I was looking at audio-visual expenditures, we've almost exceeded the amount currently through October that you put in for 2021.
Yeah, I did drop that back too. No, I was thinking that's really what we, that comes out of ebooks.
I can double check that too, to make sure.
Yeah, part of Hoopla, of course, is, audiobooks and that sort of thing.
But I mean, in the category of our audio-visual expenses, we've almost exceeded $8,000 through October.
Yes, it looks like we're gonna be cutting back. Yeah, I mean, 9,875 out of the book budget means we're gonna buy less things, basically.
I have a general question, Paul. So when you finish this item, then before we go to the next one, let me ask the general question.
Is there any more questions on the materials budget? I think, generally I look at the materials budget more as a total rather than the individual categories. We keep track of it through individual categories, so we know, what we're spending in certain areas, but overall, if you got main circulation at 29,000, and we say, oh my gosh, we definitely need, more audio visual, it's not a big deal to move that around. The big deal is to stay within 92,200 total.
I would think though that with people staying home more, that they might have a greater need for materials than ordinarily. I would think they wouldn't be coming into the library as much. Are we not finding that to be the case? I know that the New York Public Library is severely limiting the number of ebooks that one can take out because the demand is so great.
The demand is great. And again, you're right. I mean, this whole pandemic has increased that demand even more than it was already increasing. But I mean, we're not the only ones out there. The ebook collections, as you know, are owned in cooperation with all 29 libraries in the system. So, total expenditures for ebooks, I believe, are something like 200,000 overall. So everybody gets to share those, but the demand is high.
You're welcome to move on to Bob's question. From my standpoint, I can't speak for anyone else, but I don't want you to be waiting on another question for me on this category.
Yeah, Bob.
Yeah, my general question was, when did you put this actually together? This budget that we're looking at for 2021?
May and June.
Pardon?
Around May and June.
May or June, not far apart. Okay.
In that general vicinity, because normally we want this approved in the July board meeting.
Okay. If there are categories in which you feel, based on your experience since that time, you would like changed, we could change it before recommending approval.
Yeah, the problem, as you're probably pointing out here, is no, we don't have figures for the end of this year when I have to prepare the budget for next year. So I have to go on trends, also on, questioning our suppliers in terms of increases. and that sort of thing, because I don't have a final December 31st expenditure, for last year yet.
Right.
So you gotta, yeah, you gotta prepare it, if you pass it in July or August, you gotta prepare it.
Because it would be nice to work with a budget you're as comfortable with as you can be and sort of forecasting, so,
Yeah,
okay, thanks. That was just my question.
okay. Programs is static here. Programs, this is essentially money that we get for grants, and a considerable amount from the Friends, by the way, who support our summer reading programs, and a bunch of other programs. So the figure, can vary, and it can go up depending on, how many grants we get. We almost always get, the Art Center grants and that sort of thing for programming. So I kind of leave those figures static at the moment because we have no idea, how that's going to work. Plus, right now, everything is different. Most of, or any of our programming now is all virtual rather than, in-house. So we're not sure exactly the kind of expenditures we're going to get next year.
Does the staff and you decide on what might be interesting and then pursue people to engage, or do most of the people come to us and ask whether they could do a certain activity or presentation?
Primarily when we're normal, when we're doing programming, the people doing programming, we have several people involved in programming, generally come up with ideas based on, the need, or based on what they've heard from other libraries. And they do contact presenters. That's what happens most of the time. Every once in a while, somebody does volunteer to be a presenter who has particular expertise in a field. And then with the arts grants, most of those programs, of course, are arts related. And the Art Center has a list of possible people who are good for programming. Like, we do a pottery workshop, and we do a couple other things that are, need somebody who really knows what they're doing.
One of the challenges that society has is occupying time, and you're more isolated. So introducing things on new hobbies
Yeah.
can get people interested in, and it carries over into how they occupy their time, or family issues.
Yeah,
I've
we've
taken
done a
part
number
now
of
in
programs
discussion
like-
on racial issues, and it's very interesting and well done. I'm enjoying it. And the person you've contracted with is very skilled and an expert, so it's enjoyable.
Yeah. Okay, in facilities, you'll see an increase in gas, although we budget gas and electric together, but in this particular case, we put that increase in the gas portion. The largest change would be in building repairs. We have reduced that by 4,000. Not that we don't need the repairs, but just that we need the money. And then supplies by 500. The Lansingburg maintenance was 2,000 actually. So I don't know what happened there, but anyway, it still adds up.
Yeah, Paul, you have a decrease of 200. It's 8,000 to 6,000, and then in the variance side, you only have 200. Shouldn't
Yeah,
that be
that's 2,000.
2,000? Yeah, okay.
That should be 2,000.
Now, I noticed that we've already exceeded 6,000 for the Lansingburg maintenance for this year.
Yeah, again, it's a matter of belt tightening in some areas. And any more questions on the facility?
Well, you have IT support under there, and that also has been exceeded this year, the amount that you've got there.
Yeah, again, we have to keep a tighter lid on some of this.
It just concerns me because we were closed for a while and we've still exceeded these, that it doesn't seem sensible to plan for less in the coming year as a result. That's my concern.
Right.
Although over the overall category, you're right that there's only a $4,000 reduction.
Right. I guess I look at, well, yeah, I think if something comes up that's really, an emergency in terms of Lansingburg maintenance, that might have to come out of building repairs.
Which has been reduced already.
Yes, it has. It is tight. I be the first to admit. But it's almost, when you're looking at this, almost the only way to do anything with that is through the materials budget.
Well, you've got big categories here. So, and I sort of look at it that you're making determinations as far as weighting the areas that you want to put money in overall, like the big categories, not the little categories, which I think you're the best judge of.
Yeah.
So, at a time like this, it might be more important to weight the materials budget because of the need that exists at this time.
One thing too here, though, I have budgeted the full amount for security. We don't know if that's really going to work. The security company we have been using, can't supply, they can supply people on a short notice for a couple of days, but they can't comply with our alternate staff working weeks. So, we may be without security for a little while in 2021 anyway.
Right. I think my note says here that we've only expended $6,500 in that line this
Yeah.
year.
So if that extends into 2021, or how far into 2021, it's going to reduce that line.
Can you explain what security covers? What is covered by that 20,000?
Essentially, it covers our security guard at the main library.
And how, every day? Is that a daily thing or when
Monday,
he's
Tuesday,
open?
well, normally it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and Saturday. Or Um, you know, it's only 4 hours those days, and 6 hours on Saturday, that kind of thing. We found that we had more difficulty towards the afternoons, at the main library, so we have somebody there afternoons into evening.
So the reason we spent so little this year is because we were closed a good part of the time, right? Is that,
What's that?
Marie said that we only spent 6,500, and so does that mean because the library was closed so much because of the
Well, yeah,
COVID?
as, as of May, of course, we were closed for several months, but also after we reopened, the security company was unable to supply us with people who could work alternate weeks. And our staff is working alternate weeks as a precaution. And so we don't want the security company sending in the same person every week.
Uh-huh.
Marie, when you and Paul had that interchange and discussed areas on here that are already overspent this year, like IT support,
Mhm.
and then there was some identification, well, possibly another item wouldn't be as costly as we've listed. Are you proposing a change, or would you want to change that, Paul? Based on this discussion for what we recommend up to the whole board? Would it be convenient to have the figures more accurate to what you think you want? You will need?
Well, I think, I'm happy with changing them in mid-year if we need to.
You're happy with changing it
In mid-year,
in mid-year?
if we need
Okay.
to, yeah. I mean, that's another option is, changing your,
Okay,
your
we could do
your
that. We
reality.
can make that change now and still consider mid-year change.
Yeah, this is, again, a plan. So once we know even more, there's no reason not to change something.
Right,
It's not, it's not, written in stone kind of thing.
right.
The basic for this budget is you can't overspend the bottom line because we don't have any money to do that.
That's true, but you like to try to have it comfortably as accurate as you can. Marie, when you had that discussion, were you thinking to suggest a change to this, or just move on and correct mid-year?
In looking at that particular category, when I looked at the total, there's just a reduction of 4,000 over, 100,000, which seems pretty minimal. So essentially, Paul's just shifting things around within. I have some concern that some of what we're seeing may be low if we're already exceeding it this year when we're not getting as much use, like water. When people aren't using restrooms like they ordinarily do. So if we do open up our restrooms, I would expect that cost to go higher. And just, wear and tear, I would expect to be more if we opened up more. So my concern is more overall, I think, with that category. But as I say, when I looked at it, it wasn't that much different.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we're reasonable overall in the facility category.
Okay,
Moving on to salaries. As you know, basically the salary increase was 3% based on the salary schedule that was approved last year. Health insurance basically has told us to expect about a 4% increase. So that's what is there. And of course, FICA increases based on salary.
So you have a vacancy currently, correct?
There's a couple actually.
Are there,
I mean, if you mean FTE, it's probably only one, but there's several, there's at least a couple part-time people.
are you planning to fill those in the coming year, or
Well,
what does this figure reflect?
yeah, it does reflect a full staff and it reflects filling those positions. At this point, the way that we're working in terms of, the hours have been reduced, but when you split your staff in half and then, try to operate, it's become difficult. If we have one person, sick or one person out, it's tough to keep up. So there is that factor. If we go back to fully open, we will need, the full staff. And that's really what I planned on. I'm not filling that position right now, given our list, but, I think we will definitely have to if we go back to full schedule.
I have a somewhat related question, and I don't want to frighten anybody, but I was curious, do we know how much Lansingburg costs to have open?
Lansingburg is only open about 12 hours.
But I mean, normally, how much I'm more asking, how much does it cost to have an additional branch open?
I could work up an exact figure, but, we go, we're looking at probably 110 to 120,000.
Okay. No, the question just popped into my head when I was looking at things, so I was more curious.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to know. Like I said, I can always work up exact figures on that too.
No, ballpark is fine.
Yeah, those figures have changed over the years, of course.
Well, I got a general question on salaries. Do you have a sense that our staff is feeling that they're more competitively paid, or is there still an assumption that we could do better in terms of being
Good question.
competitive?
Right now, I haven't heard a lot of complaints. So what do I think? I think the staff is very aware of the efforts that we're making to be more competitive. I think, like every other employee, they see something like, oh, somebody's over here paying 52 grand for this position and look where I am. But that's kind of hearsay. That's a bunch, you have to really compare a lot of things when you're talking about changing jobs. But on paper, we do seem a lot more competitive than we were. The only thing when you bring benefits in, there's a couple of issues with benefits. A lot of times in the public library field, the staff is covered by New York State retirement system. New York State retirement system is, generally speaking, more generous than a private organization like TIA and CREF. At least that's the perception out there. And the other thing is we only cover 50% of health insurance costs per employee, which is relatively low, although that has changed over the last few years where companies and employers have reduced, the percentage. So it's a kind of a complicated question. I don't know what everybody's thinking out there, but I think they appreciate the efforts that are being made.
Yeah, it's tough because I know in some industries, if you can hire companies that are focused on compensation, wage, and they help you remain competitive, but it's tricky. I know when I came to Albany, the healthcare systems had been exchanging information about nurses' salaries, and they were being fined for doing it. So you need to be very careful not to collude about setting salaries. At the same time, you want to know that your staff is competitively paid, and it's hard. I know there's some affluent communities that might have more resources, so they pay it. But fairness is the issue. So it's just a hard thing to know. And I don't know that Upper Hudson can give you any help with that.
May I
But,
interject?
it's very tough, but the staff themselves,
Well, we do keep an eye on compensation in other public libraries, not only regionally, but also around the state. So, yeah, we do keep an eye on it anyway.
If I may, add a little bit to this. Certainly when we really started looking at the salaries, there was an investigation, like as Paul says, not just regionally, but nationally at public libraries and compensation. But when you mention, and again, this is very complicated, Paul's correct, because there's a lot of variables to this, but Upper Hudson does not only collect, but publishes data on salary structure and makes it part of the annual report that comes out usually in June about the 29 different libraries and where each library is ranked in salary compensation.
well, that's handy to know.
Yep.
I'd like to see it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome very much.
Are we wanting to move on to operating? If that can go a little higher. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's good. Okay, we've got some changes based on anticipated increases that we've heard about. Obviously, you can see where the audit is under budget at the moment. The automation line, I sort of automatically added 500, but I don't actually think it's going to go that high because, well, there's still a question about the automation charges for next year. Tim had suggested a 2%, and most people felt that probably wasn't enough. I think he went back to the drawing board with at least a 5%, which we already have covered, and would not have huge problems with a 10% increase in automation. Memberships that decrease, again, is something that we can do. Memberships here, actually, most of that or a lot of that is ends up in periodicals. You have to be a member so that we put that item in a separate budget line, which is kind of strange, but it's always the way we budgeted that. It can also include, though, memberships in the the bid and
The
that
chamber?
sort of thing. I'm not sure we can lose 1,000 there, but that's a sort of a guess. Insurance has been increased based on the direction it's been going in the last couple of years. So we do expect that to increase as well. Printing, I thought, to reduce a little bit. We have been doing a little less, and we haven't been doing the actual printed newsletter as many times as we normally do. We have been sending out an email newsletter, and that's maybe going to be the direction that we need to go. Okay, the special services only is increased based on the increase in CDTA income. And
What goes into miscellaneous administration?
miscellaneous is, we don't know where else to put it. I don't know, Joy. What's in there anyway?
Sometimes if there's like different fees for like the credit card,
Right.
sometimes we have to put it in there because we have to report that separately. But I can look again just to offhand. I can't remember it all, but that's one of the ones.
I was just curious as to some examples, and that is a line that was higher this year than the amount that's in here.
Yep.
Kind of based on past experience.
The other thing is that the line for audit is $2,500 too small.
Yep. I wasn't expecting that much of an increase. Where am I now?
Communications.
Communications,
I-
postage.
Can I go back, Paul? Can I just ask a question about insurance? What does that cover?
Insurance,
Yeah, is it liability? Is it,
Yep.
what is it?
liability, boiler insurance, the whole bunch.
It's all the building and every insurance on the building, et cetera, on all the fire and theft and,
Yeah, that's fire and liability, basically.
mhm. And that
Directors.
includes the directors and officers?
Yes,
Insurance.
yes, it does.
That's not a bad price.
Well, yeah, it's, you get a pretty good price. And every time we've gone to bid that, we haven't gotten that good a price, so.
Should we look at it to make sure we have that it covers us adequately?
Depends.
It looks kind of low.
Well, it's not, yeah. I suppose it's not the Cadillac of insurance policies, but that's the way we are. For example, it has very high deductibles.
Okay.
I mean, somebody comes in and vandalizes the building or you know, the deductible on stuff like that is $2,500.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't even, you know, that stuff doesn't even kick in until you've got some fairly major expense.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think I'm more concerned about the liability end of it.
It seems, you know, fairly high at this point. I can't quote exactly where it is.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, it might be time to review the whole insurance situation.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Who is the carrier?
Hartford is, well, we go through an agency, what the heck's their name?
It's Rosen Kiernan.
Rosen
Oh,
Kiernan.
Rosen Kiernan.
Yep.
Okay, yep, I know Rosen Kiernan, right.
Let's see, I guess our fire and so on is through Hartford. Or no, through
Hanover.
just the boiler.
It's
Hanover. I
yeah.
get Hanover and Hartford. Hartford is the boiler insurance, Hanover is the liability and fire insurance.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it might not be a bad idea to go over it with insurance agent and see just what we're covered for at some point.
Well, we know what we're covered for. We have,
Well, I mean, I'm talking about the amount of coverage that we have.
whether or not, well, it's something the board, can easily take a look at in terms of the coverage that they have. And is that what we're comfortable with? That's kind of a board decision. We can review the insurance that we have and better at another time since I don't have it in front of me.
Right, right. Yeah, I used to work for the insurance department, so I'm very, I get very paranoid about insurance. So, having heard many horror stories.
Well, I had a question, just based on the varied questions and the scrutiny. Is there anything that you would like to change before we start to see about supporting this to the board? And because there's still an opportunity here. You could make the changes in pencil and we could vote on a change, and it should be simple to just change this form to present to the board. If there's something that you feel would improve it for you and be more accurate, we'd be glad to entertain it.
Actually, Bob, not at this point. I feel, pretty comfortable with what we have. Especially considering, the uncertainty out there. We don't even know when we're going to be back to full operation. So I would wait. I think these numbers are good to use, good to go on. But yes, there could be changes down the line, and I think once we get into the year, after a couple of months, we may want to change some of these categories.
Okay, good. I think when we get nearer to it, how we would present those, whether we actually change a budget mid-year or accommodate it in a different terminology, we could have discussions before. But I understand what you're saying. Let's take a look mid-year and assess and
Yeah, I think
what needs to change. It may not be the budget that needs to change, but our management of the budget. Are there any other questions that we would like to ask Paul before we come to the last part of the meeting, which is to take a vote on whether to move this forward with or what kind of recommendation to move it forward with?
I have two major concerns. One I brought up when it was first suggested. The amount that's in there for the tax levy delinquencies is the same amount that we've put in all our budgets in recent years. And it seems low to me, considering we have no idea with all the uncertainty exists for the next year, how much revenue we may actually get. $10,000 is less than 1% of our of our budget. And that's what we think is the normal adjustment. So that makes me very uneasy.
One of the people I ran into in my activities yesterday is a well-known downtown realtor. And I asked that person about sales. And she said, it's a very, very strong market, that people are seeking to purchase properties in Troy who are leaving New York City, and the prices are all moving up. And she described it, didn't want to give a gender, because Jerry will know what I'm talking about. But the feeling that person had was the real estate market is very solid and impressively so. So I'm not sure that we'll be seeing less in property taxes. Then again, you have a whole sort of liquid landlord situation.
Yeah, I think, it's not called these uncertain times for nothing. It's very difficult, and we had certainly worried about that mid-year last year. Right now, we're actually within about $5,000 of, the full amount. And I expect actually we'll receive the full amount by the end of the year. I don't know. I mean, how do we?
I mean, that's the problem though, is we don't know. So
Yeah, I mean,
we need to make provision for that.
well, I think you can make provisions, but I think they're going to be in the middle of the year.
Well, but I always worry about the commitment we make to our staff. So what if we find in the middle of the year that the taxes aren't coming in? Do we lay off staff?
Well, I mean, to what extent? I mean, if this is a major disaster, yeah, you do.
But Bob, I heard the same thing. I spoke to realtors, bankers, and the assessor's office, and they reinforce everything you said, that prices are going up, property is not staying on the market very quickly. I also asked about some things that Mark had brought up about escrow accounts, but many people are still in escrow accounts. So there will be that continuation of funding and resources. And if you've paid cash and not gone that route, you probably still can afford your taxes. I know I'm not pretending I have a crystal ball. I'm not pretending I know what's going to happen in the future. I know that things are still very shaky. But if you look at some of the sources that kind of know what's coming up, it seems like, at least for the time being, we shouldn't be, we can find some stability. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I concur. Marie, I think in saying that, I think we could become concerned with one or another thing that might happen, but I wouldn't try to reflect it in the budget at this point.
I think too, you can rest assured that your administrative staff is proceeding with caution.
We had a very good year for this. We got more than
money.
Yeah, we do know that Paul is very conservative, conservative in how he uses funds. And he keeps a very tight ship.
In his administration or his personal life?
Administratively. I don't know what he does at home. No clue. I don't know him out of the office at all.
I was born that way.
I think that's a song title.
Maria, is that okay with you if we don't?
Well, I'm not comfortable. I'm not comfortable with that, but I had heard quite a while ago that the real estate market was hot.
Yeah,
What about the people who own homes and have lost their jobs? Are they going to be able to pay their taxes? I mean, you're looking at a certain segment. The COVID numbers are ramping up. We're going into winter. People haven't been paying their rents for a while now because of COVID. I mean, you're looking at one segment and saying, oh, this is really strong, but I don't know that makes for an overall healthy economy. A lot of the big developers have pilots. They don't pay increased taxes. They pay on the original price of the building before they did any development. I believe in being conservative.
But all we really know at this point too, though, is that it hasn't impacted our tax levy income.
I would just say this, Maria. I agree with your sentiment, but looking over this budget and listening to the discussion and taking it all in, there's no extravagance in the budget. I mean, it's really, it's a very lean budget process. So I think the custodial aspect of Paul's administration is very strong. And we'll have to manage what we manage with unforeseen things. And, look at this year. We all were very sure we were going to experience more difficulty than we actually had. And we got together and we had a series of meetings and we planned a 10% reduction annualized and then and it turned out we didn't have to implement that at all. And so I think we are a responsive board and a vigilant administration, and that we will act when we have to, but I think it's fair to support the budget unchanged.
I would have to go back and look, but I suspect a lot of the tax revenue came in toward the earlier part of the year, and that the amounts that we've been getting later in the year are not as great as we had been projecting on past performance.
Well, do you know off the top of your head, can you comment on Marie's?
No, I don't think that's true. I think, what we've seen the second half is actually higher than we expected.
I would have to go back and look. I know that what you've indicated for this month is lower than projected for the month.
They changed a little bit in terms of when we see a check, we're getting more checks with less money than we did before. So they're sending money as soon as they got it. They're not holding anything.
Which is good news that
Yeah.
they're not.
Yeah,
Because I would be if I were the city. I'd be hanging on to it as long as I could.
right.
Let me try to draw the discussion to a close, Marie. I hear you. Do you want to put it to a vote of the trustees, whether we continue this and attempt to do that, or whether we can move forward? You've said that how you feel. We've said how we felt. And now we're restating our positions. I'd like to just move on in a way that.
And when would you like me to bring up my second concern?
Well, only if the first one has been dealt with. I'd like to deal with that one.
Well, okay, why don't we have a vote on it.
Vote, okay.
I'm not unused to being overruled, so.
So you're inviting overruling?
Well,
Yeah, there's a difference.
yeah, I invite,
Yeah.
different
Okay,
opinions,
We've
yes.
all had the discussion, so the issue is, should we consider action based on the concern of the tax levy being likely not to be met? And so the two opinions are, yes, we should act on that and take some action on this budget, or not. I would say not. Maria would say yes. Is there any more discussion about it before we vote?
Well, maybe we could get some information from the city about how revenues are coming in. I
They
mean, not
haven't come-
before we vote, but that would be.
One of the places I did speak to was the assessor's office, because this
Mhm.
was,
Oh, right.
and they're saying, monies are coming in. And we've, as the library, right, Paul, have seen our tax levy monies coming in. And I do not believe the assessor's office is seeing any real change in that for next year. Again, they don't have a crystal ball either, but that was one of the things I was talking to someone over there about. So right now, I think they're holding a steady state, or thinking that there will be a steady state, because you have to think about it. People, with the incomes, even if their income is, I will say, in jeopardy or foreshortened, they still need shelter. There aren't a lot of places people can go except where they're living. So at some point, rents will be paid, taxes will be paid. People can't afford, basically, philosophically, to lose their homes.
Okay,
Not
thank you.
now.
Thank you. Did you want to offer a yes or a no, Evelyn?
Just so I know, I'm voting in the right direction. I'm voting, I think you said your vote was the no. So I'm voting your way, Bob.
Okay, to leave it as it is. And Jerry?
Yes.
What are we voting on exactly?
Marie
Marie's
suggested that we should alter the budget with the apprehension that we may not receive the tax levy that we've booked in this budget. And so that's the question. Should we ask that this be altered, or do we support the budget? That's the question. In terms of
because I had my own.
That's the
I had
area.
my own.
Focus on.
Okay, so I had my own thoughts as well. When we talked about insurance, let me just put this out there, and maybe this isn't the time or the place to bring this up. But my concern is, if we don't have enough liability insurance, we as the board are responsible.
Right.
So I want to make sure that we have enough insurance that covers us. And what are our protections? Where are our protections limited? Like if you're in a limited liability corporation, it all goes to the corporation. I think at some point I'd like to explore that. Maybe that's not for now, but
Well, that's a very important item, but it would be nice, but it's a new item. So
right.
just trying to resolve this issue about whether we accept the tax levy in this budget and move on to a next concern. But I think what you're raising.
Yeah, the tax levy
Is the
is
hope
okay
issue?
with me. If we're just doing the tax levy issue, yes,
Okay, thank you.
I agree with you.
All right. Now, do you want to continue to talk about that? Maria was ready to talk about a second thing, so I'd like to go back.
Yes, go ahead, Marie.
Back to you.
My
Yes.
other concern in reviewing this budget is the controversy about the construction account and the proposal that the construction account is actually a reserve fund. And when I asked if that were the case, where would the money come from the matches? I was told the operating budget. So we need to resolve whether the construction account is indeed a construction account to be used for matches and other purposes related to the building, or whether we have to find $130,000 in to put toward the construction matches for the coming year.
Just to be clear, Marie, a clarification. You're talking about the 1260 Key Bank Construction Fund, which last month or in August was like 145,000. It's
No, it should be about
no,
200,000.
1260. The Key Bank Construction was 200,000 for building
Yes.
projects and operating reserve.
Right.
And you're questioning that it should not be operating reserve. What do you question?
I contend that it is indeed supposed to be used for the toward the building and construction, and that we need to resolve that because we need to know where we're getting $130,000, at least $130,000 for the matches for next year. And if we can't rely on the construction fund because that's an operating reserve, then we need to allocate money in this budget for it.
To answer your question, if we can't rely on the construction fund to meet the needs of both building projects and operating reserve, wouldn't that be a question of how much we need to have in the fund rather than I think your question sort of is, do we have enough money in there to do what we need to do? And I'm not understanding what you want to do about that.
Well, I believe that there is enough money in there for, at least for the current matches and our current commitments.
Yeah.
Perhaps, I don't know that there's enough for us to put out for toward the grants that we will then get reimbursed for, but at least for us to meet the matches, but not if it's going to be designated an operating reserve rather than being available for the construction.
Okay, if we eliminated the operating reserve and left it as Key Bank Construction for building projects, where would you like to put the operating reserve that we need to build?
I think I'm total agreement to establish an operating reserve. I think we probably should have started working on that earlier because we don't have the ability to borrow money. So considering that we can't borrow money, it seems even less reasonable that we wouldn't have worked on it earlier. I think we should establish an operating reserve designated as such that is separate. And
Okay, I understand what you're saying.
that won't be commingled. But right now, my concern is where is the money going to come from?
I'm sorry,
for-
I'm
for the
confused.
matches. Mhm.
Oh, I'm hearing two things, Marie, that you're
Mm-hmm.
saying that you've been told money for matches is going to come out of an operating budget. Then I'm hearing you're saying that what is now entitled the construction non-restricted is really an operating, and I don't know where I've ever heard that it's only going to be an operating reserve. So I'm kind of confused. I think one of the last things that was suggested was retitling it because maybe it was misnamed when it was first created to the construction and operating construction and operating unrestricted fund.
Yeah,
Which means it can be used for either whatever is necessary depending on need. And if we know money is going to be needed for matches, then that money is reserved in a sense, internally reserved for that. And what's left, if we need to use it for something operational, we have it available. So,
Okay, I had never heard it referred to as a construction and operating fund.
Can I hold down the cross discussion for a moment and make a proposal?
Yeah.
I asked Paul very specifically for a listing of our accounts and their titles. And a part of it was to determine how they're used. And then we got that finalized and then shared it with Marie. Marie, I think your point is, where do we put our reserve? And I think you, Paul, and I could meet, decide that, and then offer the change of the name of how we describe our funds. And I think that would take care of your concern. And because if we moved the reserve into 1227, we just then have to agree that 1227 is going to grow by a certain amount. It's more nomenclature than it is function. So I hear what you're saying. You're concerned that the key bank construction is not sufficient to meet our needs. And so the first thing we need to do is line it up. So the question isn't that, the question is, do we have enough operating reserve and what do we build toward? We now have maybe an opportunity to build a reserve. Is that your thinking, Paul? Could you comment?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we designated, the undesignated construction account because our biggest need has always been matching grants for construction projects. The board can move money around in any of those accounts. I mean, with approval of the board, you can take money out of, except the construction account that is state money. But I think what I had suggested before is that we have, an operating reserve account, which we don't have a separate account right now called
Okay.
reserve.
Well, but
that's-
I've never heard it referred to as anything but a construction account. I've never heard it referred to until you said that recently.
That's what I
that it's a
thought
reserve fund.
years ago, and that's what it has been, but I think we've moved on at this point. We know what our obligations are for construction in the next 2 years. So that obviously is money that the board is going to say, yes, we need to keep that in the account. But, I've been operating for 30 years without any reserve at all.
Yeah, and
Right.
everybody's agreed. Well, I think everyone has agreed to the idea that we need an operating reserve. Haven't had the opportunity to fund it. And now what I'm saying is, and Maria is saying, if we have a construction account, it should be for that. And if we have a key bank investment, unrestricted from operating, we could add to it. Just say that that's where our operating reserve is and put some amount that we'll try to fund in that thing. I think Marie wants clarity about the safety of building expenses, including construction.
Yeah, I think
We all want a reserve, so let's just break them up and do it.
Okay, and we can do it separately, but, since it would impact if we were going to try and get the matching out of this year's operating budget, that would have to be considered now. But if we can agree that what has always been referred to as a construction account is indeed a construction account, and then work on establishing an operating reserve. That
I
would make-
actually think there's no contention here. I think it's nomenclature. In what you're saying, Marie, is you want to be sure that the name reflects the need and we can be sure that it's the same. And yet we all know we want operating. So I think you, Paul, and I can resolve it with what we call what account, which I suggest let's have a three-way meeting and do that. And then we can also try to figure out what do we want for an operating reserve? Maybe we can do it, maybe we can do it partly, and we'll know what our objective is.
Yes, I think that there are a number of things that would be involved in an operating reserve. We would need to establish the kind of the rules as to how it would be used, money would be used from it. So if the group is amenable to having us work on that, I'm fine with it.
Okay. Is that okay with you, Evelyn?
If, how do I put this? If the final outcome of this is that there'll be some work done on nomenclature,
Yeah.
on rules, on how things are defined, then my answer would be sure. However, as long as it does not include saying that what is in there now is strictly and only for construction at this point in time.
Yeah, no one's talked to that.
Well, I heard a little bit of that, so I wanted to make sure that that comment was made, so there was no question about what I was agreeing to.
We will in our meeting make a determination what that is. Jerry, are you okay with this? That we'll take it to Marie, Paul, and I and make some changes in the the naming of the grants, the bank accounts.
Yeah.
And Bob, you mean suggested changes that will then go before, what would be the process? The three of you making the decisions or the suggestions, would it then go to the finance committee and then go to the full board?
Yeah, I don't think it's that big of a deal, but yes, we'll come up with a proposal.
Okay,
We'll share it with the finance committee and then we'll tell the board, or I could do it in a report from the finance committee. This is what we're doing with our funds, and let the board know in case there's any oversight issues. We'll inform everybody before we do it.
okay, I just want to make sure that that process is going to bubble up.
Yeah, we'll do it, sure.
Well,
Okay,
I think,
great.
I think part of the problem is that the board has, when I asked, you said that the board had never designated it as a construction fund. I imagine it didn't designate it as an operating reserve either. So I would see approval by the board
Yes.
of both, not so much the name, but what the rules are, where the money comes from for the operating reserve, how much there should be. So yes, I think it's definitely important for the board
Okay,
to make the decision.
all right. Was there something else that, did you have something else, or Jerry?
Jerry.
I mentioned the insurance, but I think that when the vote on it for the board, I'd like to see that we can examine the insurance obligations and what the insurance covers, and leave some room if we need to expand the budget to cover that, cover a new insurance policy or an expanded insurance.
You want to?
I think the insurance question. I think the insurance question is an important one. What? I think the insurance liability question is an important one, and I'd like to be sure we're adequately funded.
Yes, okay.
And there was a concern that they seem to be reimbursing us very little for Lansingburg damage that occurred versus what we were going to have to pay to
Right.
have it repaired. So it's
Well,
perhaps
that's a
timely to
function.
look at the whole, and all together.
Yeah, that's probably a function of the deductible.
Yeah,
that we
I
have.
think what we're now doing is listing areas for us to pursue as a finance committee to explore and develop, if there are needed changes, make recommendations and do it. So we have the insurance, we have the fund management, the bank accounts and what they use for, and we'll be coming up with some rules in addition. So then that would lead me back to attempt to ask Is there a motion to take this budget that we've just reviewed and present it to the board with a recommendation of approval?
Evelyn?
Sure. I'll make that motion. If you don't want to make the motion, Bob, I'll make it.
Yeah, thank you. I think as a chair, it's better if I not, if it comes from you.
Well,
And let's see if we get a second. If we don't, I might have to act. Do we have a second on the motion, or would like any more discussion on it? I think it's pretty clear.
Am I allowed to second as a non-official
yes.
finance committee member? Okay,
Yes.
then I second.
Besides, we didn't have our organizational
Yeah,
part yet. So guess what? You just became a member.
Great.
Absolutely, you do that. All right, then we have that. Is there any discussion before we vote?
Well, I don't know if I want to vote yes on giving to the board for approval. I think we need to discuss, I think for discussion rather than approval, because we have some questions about.
Well, we make the suggestion, or we can vote to bring this to the board, recommending approval, but there could still be discussion at the board during the board meeting about whether or not it should be approved.
Of course.
And I'll just say this now too, and bite me if you will.
Yeah, I'm
This
sure.
budget, we've put this budget in front of the public. To me, that is in some way an implicit contract with the public that this is what we're spending. This is pretty much how we're spending it, unless, of course, there are other situations and environmental issues that change how we have to deal with the budget. But for the most part, this is what we, again, to me, this is an implicit contract that we already made and presented. And sorry, but for my reading, of course, of the bylaws, unless you want to split hairs, this should have been done in July.
Well, I wasn't on the board in July.
Oh, I know. It just that, that whole issue of,
Right.
well, we didn't do this, we did the tax. No. Anyways, but that's just my personal opinion. But seriously, I do think we made a contract with the public, and this is what our budget is. And you want to be recommending at least bringing it to the board next meeting.
Yes, okay.
Vote it down.
All right, I agree we should bring it to the board. I agree that we should bring it to the board.
I know, but
Yes.
we were voting on
It's
whether we
discuss-
bring it to the board
With support.
and let them know that we are comfortable with approving it. If you bring it to the whole purpose of this meeting was to review the budget and see whether we could send it to the board with our approval or not. And so.
Which means they would they automatically
What
vote
we're
on it?
voting on,
No, there's
Is
no
that-
automatic. There's,
we're
there's
both
Okay.
voting at the same time.
sorry, Bob, I'm sorry.
I
No, there's no
believe we-
automatic. This delay doesn't work well with me, I don't know if you're talking, there's no automatic approval once a recommendation is made. It's just it's like a suggestion. It might be a strong suggestion, but we offer the recommendation with the idea that the finance committee is in support of this, but the board can go through this whole process of discussing, bringing up all the issues and vote up or down.
Okay,
Evelyn, I don't think there's anybody on the board that doesn't know that they can ask whatever they want, raise any questions, have any discussion.
Well, I think that was the question Jerry just asked.
Yeah,
Right.
Jerry was suggesting it was pro forma, that it be approved by the board.
if we recommended, if they would just take it as it is without
So it's-
discussion.
But we've had things change. For instance, the finance committee had recommended that there not be a tax increase this year.
Mhm.
And then when it went to the board, there were other perspectives heard. And the eventual decision was that there should be an increase in the tax levy. So
Okay,
yes, that's sort of a,
I'm just trying to give the board a product that we've worked on, and I'm sure that they're going to benefit from Paul's walkthrough of anything in the budget that they may have questions about. I think there'll be another discussion. Every board person ought to be fairly comfortable with the fiduciary responsibilities that they have. And I'm just trying to make the finance committee a functional one for them. So to get back to it, I'm not sure if you were trying, what I was trying to say, what I did, not trying to say, what I did say is I would like to bring this budget to the board saying we spent time and got educated really by Paul. And there's nothing in it that we would object to. And we'd like them to consider it for their approval. And discussion. Now, Evelyn, is that okay with you?
Yes. So the answer is
Maybe
yes.
calling a vote. We talked about it and talked about it. Discussion. Is there any discussion on this now?
If you put it that way for your discussion and possible approval, yes, I'm okay with that.
I may float the wording and read from it among us. Okay, then we'll have the vote. Brianna, do you want to, I'll go name by name. Brianna, would you like to weigh in on this?
No, I agree with taking it to the board.
Okay, Evelyn?
I agree taking it to the board with the recommendation that it be, for approval based on discussion, etc.
Thank you. Jerry?
What Evelyn said. Yes, I agree. I agree that it be brought forth for approval with discussion.
Yes. Marie?
I'm sorry, I have to vote no, just because I think there should be more allowance for the uncertainty coming up.
Okay.
But-
I'll let them know it was not unanimous, so the discussion can be active. All right, well, Paul, thank you very much for your thorough discussion. It was very helpful to me, and I'm sure all of us. And it was done very well. Your responsiveness was informative and helpful. Is there anything else we should consider before we consider adjourning?
Your material that you prepared, Bob, was helpful in the process as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Marie, a lot. I would like to thank Joy, because this was the first time we did this in this order. And we went back and forth many times about it. And there's a couple of things probably now. We still go back and forth one more time before, I don't, the board doesn't have to see this. So, is this a good instrument to give to the board?
Yes,
All
Yes.
right. And, there's a couple more tweaks we'll do, Joy, but we're in good shape. And,
Absolutely.
I really thank you. I'd like the people to know that before the meeting of the 13th, we had this prepared, but we didn't finalize until the early afternoon of the 13th. And Joy did weekend work with it with me back and forth, converted it from her system to Excel so I could work on it more freely. We went back and forth many times, and it was extraordinary, her responsiveness all weekend. For weekends are dear to everybody, but when you have a family, it's even more dear. So I really do appreciate you, Joy.
Oh, thanks, Bob.
All righty.
Yes.
All right, if
Joy.
there's no other business, well,
No, can I just say I liked that you put it, that it was on the screen for us to see, so we could see it and we didn't have to jump back and forth trying to find it on a Dropbox. I also have to say I messed up my whole computer system by getting into Dropbox yesterday. So I don't know what happened to it, but it asked me for a password and I ended up doing this Google password and it messed up my whole system. So still trying to recover from that,
You almost sent it
not
out.
being a techie person.
to
but
the-
we'll
the-
do it. But this was very helpful to have it on the screen.
I
Thank
should-
you.
Yes, it was helpful to share. Yes. But it's nicer in your hand, you can flip around or see what's next and stuff. All right, anyone like to entertain a motion to adjourn? I'd be happy to hear one. It's been a
Motion to adjourn?
fearful process of what's going on in our nation. All righty, I did
I
work 3
second.
polls yesterday. I was supervising with 3 EDs. And we were a little worried about what we might encounter, and that was very, very smoothly done. So that was a relief.
Good,
And
good for you. Thank you.
I wish
Thanks
us
for
all
doing
good
that.
luck in that arena.
Oh, yeah.
We had a motion to adjourn.
I did. Motion to adjourn.
A
I
second.
second. I second.
All right. Any objections to adjourning?
No, but Paul, I have a quick
No.
question for you. After the meeting adjourned, I just have a quick question.
Okay, but I have a deadline in 5, 4, 3, 2 minutes.
Okay,
It won't take that
gonna-
long.
I got an
Oh.
appointment.
All right.
You want to stop the recording?
Bye.
Thank you very much. Then we'll